College of Arts and Commerce, Nelamangala. One-day international webinar on carbon dynamics in the deciduous forest. Today, I request our principal to come over the dais. I request Dr. S. Jagada, convener of this national webinar, to come over the dais. Next, I will request Professor B.M. Malini to come over the dais. She is working as a NAAC coordinator. Now, I request Dr. K. Amarendra, coordinator for IQAC. Let us commence the program with the invocation song by Kumari Damini, third year BCom students of our college.
कृष्णा नीरजेक्षणा जय जनार्दना कृष्णा राधिकापते जन विमोचना कृष्णा जन्ममोचना गरुड वाहना कृष्णा गोपिकापते नयन मोहना कृष्णा नीरजेक्षणा सुजन बांधवा कृष्ण सुंदराकृते मदन कोमला कृष्ण माधवा हरे वसुमती पते कृष्ण वासवानुजा वरगुणाकरा कृष्ण वैष्णवा कृते सुरुचिरानना कृष्ण शौर्यवारिदे मुरहरा विभो कृष्ण मुक्तिदायका विमल पालक कृष्ण वल्लभीपते कमललोचना कृष्ण काम्यदायक जय जनार्दना कृष्ण राधिकापते जन विमोचना कृष्ण जन्ममोचना गरुड वाहना कृष्ण गोपिकापते नयन मोहना कृष्ण नीरजेक्षणा नयन मोहना कृष्ण नीरजेक्षणा नयन मोहना कृष्ण नीरजेक्षणा. Thank you.
To propose a welcome address.
Very good morning to all and very good morning to everyone present in online. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you and chair the opening ceremony on behalf of our institution and IQAC. We got good support from our management to conduct such wonderful one-day national level webinar on carbon dynamics in deciduous forests. Firstly, I would like to remember Reverend Swamiji, His Holiness Sree Siddaganga Mahaswamigalu, President of Sri Siddaganga Education Society registered Tumakuru, with the yeoman service of nurturing 10,000 students with food, shelter, and education, that is Trivida Dasoha. I welcome you humbly, Reverend Swamiji, in your absence. I also welcome Sri Shivakumar Shekar, founder, Indo-European Committee, Poland. Our keynote address of webinar, he agrees our invitation without a second thought for this function. We welcome you, sir, for this webinar. I welcome Dr. H.S. Suresh, keynote speaker, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, for our webinar. I welcome you, sir, to this webinar. I welcome you the function on behalf of our institution, and personally I welcome you, sir, to this function. I welcome one more guest of honor, Dr. Guruprasad, DRDO retired officer, to this webinar. I also welcome my IQAC team and seminar team for their cooperation and well support. I welcome my colleagues, staff who supported and worked with us since the beginning of the planning of stage to make it success. I also welcome the press, print media and digital media persons who present here. Finally, I warmly welcome you all again for this webinar. Thank you, one and all. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka Mate.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I request Dr. S. Jagada, and who is also a convener for this national seminar, to propose a introductory note. Sri Siddaganga Degree College, located at rural area, with the blessings of Dr. Sree Shivakumar Mahaswamiji, former president of our education society. Now, I seeking the blessings of at present President Sree Siddaganga Mahaswamiji, and who is also the president of our society. With the blessings of both of them, we are conducting such a wonderful program today. Now, I request Dr. S. Jagada, convener for this seminar. Over to Madam.
Good morning, everyone. Offering my pranamas and seeking the blessings of the two great visionaries of our esteemed institution. Now, let me deliver a brief introductory note on the topic carbon dynamics in deciduous forests. So before this, let me take up a brief introduction to the topic. The rapid urbanization and also the economic development is mainly responsible for the economical and ecological crisis in nature. Whenever we take up these two factors, they lead to the destruction of nature and also environment. And with this record on this background, it is very essential for all of us to adapt the system of green campus in every university and college. It is an essential factor for all the colleges and universities to adapt this system of green audit. Why this is necessary? For what reason? Because this is a very important factor which enables to maintain the sustainable development and also cut down the threats posed among the human health. So with this regard, we can find even the NAAC has recommended this green audit as a useful tool to come across the various factors of the environment. It is a credit requisite that is very much needed in almost all the universities and colleges. And what is the use of this great credit? It is it is a weapon, it is a tool which helps us to maintain the greenery environment and ecological environment. And this is nothing but the main objective of the green audit. The green audit, it just tries to preserve environment and also it tries to give a place for the ecology and ecosystem. Ecology and ecosystem can be easily maintained only with the help of green audit. And this is nothing but the one where practically the energy, the uses of the carbon balancing can be controlled. Rain harvest can take place with reference to the water consuming, then the planting of the trees, and coming to the hardest waste management. Keeping in view of the perceptions, whatever I have named, this is nothing but a process very much recommended by NAAC as one of the important criteria which comes under criteria 7, with the institutional practices and also the values, ethics and awareness. Keeping all these factors in view of the concerning ecology, each and every college and university has to promote this green audit. And this will be very helpful to balance the carbon cycle in the environment. I hope this has reached you. With this brief introduction, let me just say once again, good morning to everyone. And we are so happy to organize this international webinar on the challenging and relevant topic, carbon dynamics in deciduous forests. Here for this webinar, we have very renowned speakers like Sree, Shivakumar Shekar from the University of Poland. And he is the founder of the Indo-European Cultural Committee. I'm very happy, it's a great legacy to our institution. So I'm very happy to have you here. And secondly, I can just go for the second, a very good personality who has sacrificed for nation with commitment and dedication. And it is none other than Dr. H.S. Suresh. He has given very valuable service to his nation. And once again, I'm very happy. He is my classmate in MAS College. I'm very honored to have him as the keynote speaker. And thirdly, coming to the person whom we never try to forget is none other than the person behind our lives. It is Dr. Guruprasad, sir, retired DRDO from the Ministry of Defense, India. So even I'm very privileged and very proud, and let me take a salute on behalf of all our community members. And a big salute to this great personality of India who has sacrificed so much in his service. And whenever we take up this topic, it is very useful, I hope, with this enlightening, resourceful, and interesting topic. And it will be elaborated by my classmate, who is none other than the resource person, H.S. Suresh. And let me take leave of or sum up with a great quote, make conservation a worldwide innovation. And thank you so much for hearing my words. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, madam. Now we have the formal way of introducing the function. I request our beloved principal, Dr. S. Rajesh and Professor B. M. Malini and Dr. S. Jagada to inaugurate the function by pouring the water to the pot. It is the formal way of inaugurating the function and just by pouring the water to the plant and by lighting the lamp. Now I request our beloved principal, Dr. S. Rajesh, Principal, Siddaganga First Year College of Arts and Commerce, Nelamangala, to address the gatherings.
Our beloved Swamiji, Dr. Sree Shivakumar Swamiji and Siddaganga Swamiji of Siddaganga Education Society and MUT. So today, our colleague Dr. S. Jagada, the seminar. So it is very useful to the students and publics It is very, very important theme selected by our colleague. ಸರ್, ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾಲೇಜಿನ ಅಧ್ಯಾಪಕರು ಒಂದು ಉತ್ತಮವಾದ ವಿಚಾರವನ್ನ ಆಯ್ಕೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ಅಂತಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಒಂದು ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಅನ್ನ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದು ಯಶಸ್ವಿ ಆಗಲಿ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗಲಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ, ಅಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಿಗೆ. ಸೊ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್.
Thank you, sir. Dr. S. Rajesh, Principal of Siddaganga First Year College of Arts and Commerce, by wishing the wellness for our program, and he is the backbone of this program. Now, I request Dr. H.S. Prakash, who is also the convener of the stage, to introduce Sree Shivakumar Shekar. I request Dr. H.S. Prakash to introduce Sree Shivakumar Shekar. Then Shivakumar Shekar sir will address us.
I am happy to introduce about the resources person, Sree Shivakumar Shekar, an NRI, permanent resident of Poland, born and brought up in the Bengaluru, India. High school studied in Sree Siddaganga Math. Later, diploma in tourism studies, bachelor in tourism studies, master in tourism management from IGNOU, New Delhi. Worked in tourism field for 20 years in Bengaluru. Written few textbook for commerce and management bachelor degree students for Bengaluru University. As co-author through Himalaya Publishing House, Bengaluru. In 2011, moved to Poland and married to Poland citizens. Sometime worked as an interpreter and coordinator for a multinational company. Later, worked for few Polish companies in sales and marketing and international business development. Since 2017, a micro businessman in interpreting the Ayurvedic cosmetics from India and distribute in Europe. I am a yoga instructor to since from the beginning technology yoga wherever possible, gyms, culture, house, hospital, weekend yoga with India cooking classes. In 2017, formed Vachana Samaja Indo-European and Cultural Committee Poland, where he familiarized 12th century ancient Kannada literature of Karnataka Vachanas and Vachanakars to Poland citizens. All executive committee members were Polish and familiarized Vachanas and Vachanakars at school, colleges, universities, cultural house, planning to touch word, emphasize the Poland for the same purpose. Have a project for Vachanas and translation to Polish language and promoting India culture with Kannada and Hindi language. Thank you very much, sir.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಶರಣಾರ್ಥಿಗಳು.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, just a minute, sir. I extend my grateful thanks to Professor H.S. Prakash to introduce Shivakumar Shekar. Now, I request Sri Shivakumar Shekar to address the gatherings. Karen, sir, over to Shivakumar, sir.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಶರಣಾರ್ಥಿಗಳು. ಪ್ರಪ್ರಥಮವಾಗಿ ಲಿಂಗೈಕ್ಯ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಶ್ರೀ ಶಿವಕುಮಾರ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿಗಳ ಪಾದಾರವಿಂದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಸ್ಕರಿಸುತ್ತಾ ಹಾಗೂ ಈಗಿನ ಶ್ರೀ ಸಿದ್ಧಲಿಂಗ ಸ್ವಾಮಿಗಳ ಪಾದಾರವಿಂದದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಸ್ಕರಿಸುತ್ತಾ, ಗುಡ್ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಎವ್ರಿವನ್. As an introductory note, friend said that I am an old student of Sri Siddaganga Math. Yes, of course, with very much proud, I could say that I am an old student of Siddaganga Math. Today's topic, carbon deciduous, carbon dynamics in deciduous forest. Actually, I am not an expert on this topic, but on the capacity of ecological lover, I can speak few words about ecology. Nowadays, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, this carbon is a great threat to this whole world, whether in-home or outside of the house. Carbon is producing a lot. It is very harmful. In this regard, we have to maintain ecological system with the carbon system. Worldwide, everywhere is urbanizing, keep on deforesting and making buildings or some projects. As we all remember, when Britishers were in India, mostly they deforested and transported woods to their country to make the railway rails. In this category, we have lost a lot of forests. Now, with God's grace, we have Western Ghats and all other forests. We have to preserve it. And frequently, environmentalists are fighting against the deforestation. Sometimes they get success in their effort, sometimes they are not. So, environment is very, very important. Just human is not the owner of this ecological system. All along the human being, so many creatures are living. Only human is riding on it, deciding on it, and spoiling on it. So, since human is a thinking animal, human, instead of spoiling the forest, spoiling the ecology, he should think about development of the forest, improvement of the forest. So ecology is very important, as we all know. Since, as I said, I am not the expert. Dr. Suresh sir and Dr. Guruprasad Siddaganga sir will speak more on this, concentrate as this. So I am also interested to listen to their speech. Siddaganga First Grade College of Nelamangala is organized an international seminar today with a lot of other co-organizers. So I would like to wish them a happy and successful webinar. Thank you very much. Over to the organizers. Sharanartigalu.
Sir, just you have delivered a wonderful presentation for us. It's a very informative. Thank you very much on behalf of our principal and also the staff members. Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Kempegoda K, lecturer in commerce, to introduce H.S. Suresh.
Good morning, everyone. I, Sree Kempegoda K, lecturer in commerce, would like to introduce the keynote speaker of today's webinar, Dr. H.S. Suresh sir. Dr. H.S. Suresh sir is trained botanist and ecologist, currently working with Devicha Center for Climate Change and Center for Ecological Sciences. He began his research with esteemed professor, the Professor Madhav Gadgil and Professor Cecil J. Saldan. He currently working with Professor R. Sukuma. He has master's degree in botany from Bangalore University. He has PhD from the Forest Research Institute, Dehradun. His doctoral thesis was on phenology of dry and mountain forest of the Nilgiris. His thesis work was an IQ which compares the phenological pattern of two different forest types and tries to synthesize general pattern found these forests. Has been involved with long-term ecological research on dry forest begins conducted in Mudumali Tiger Reserve, Tamil Nadu over the last 30 years. His research interest are dry forest ecology and climate change. He has over 100 research publications, both nationals and international. He has over 100 research publications, both national and international scientific journals. Sir, once again, I would like to this event, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now I request Dr. H.S. Suresh, Ecologist, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and is the keynote speaker of today's function. Over to you, sir.
Can I present now? the precipitation. At the same time, there is so much of droughts that has been projected over the temperature. Next slide, please. This graph will tell you how the mean surface temperatures are kind of raising. And then you can also look at that, there is a pattern here which has got spikes here around 2010, and then there is so much of variability across that. Next temperature, next slide, please. Now, this is for India. If there is a global projection, what do we do with India? This is from the climate projections based on Hadley Regional Climate Model number 3. In the business 2 scenario, P2 scenario is business 2 scenario. So the graph of the map of India on the left panel shows the predicted temperature change by 2085. There is definitely going to be changes in the temperatures, and the large part of India is going to be affected. At the right panel of the graph or right panel of the picture, it shows there is a change in the rainfall pattern by 2025. That means large part of the central India, including Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and a large part of the peninsular India, including parts of Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, is going to be extremely going to experience the change in the rainfall scenario, what presently known as. And this is the forested map of India produced by the Forest Survey of India. So the patterns it shows how the forests are distributed. Forests are generally distributed in the central India, northeast India, and in the Himalayan Kashmir, including Himachal Pradesh and all that. And there is a big chunk of forest on the Western Ghats, and then in peninsular India. The green color, shows that these things will not be changed, or the vegetation patterns in these, or the changes in the vegetation in the grids, which is expected to be changed in the climate change, will not change if it is a green, and then will change if it is a red. So there is a considerable chunk of Indian landscape which shows red. That means there is a considerable change that is going to be predicted in the forest cover or the vegetation pattern. Next slide, please. So to summarize, what are all the impacts of climate change? Is first one could be loss of ozone layer, because of the UV rays that come into that. And in the rise in the temperature of the earth, there is a rise in the surface temperature, rise in the sea level, and then increase in the frequency of, oh, you haven't changed. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, hold it. So what could be the impact of temperature, impact of climate change? To summarize in few blank bullet points. First one could be loss of ozone layer because of UV rays and other stuff that is going to hamper. Second is the rise in the temperature, that is the surface temperature of the earth is going to change and it is going to rise. Because of this activity, there is a rise in the sea level, which could submerge some chunk of our land area. The most important thing will be the increase in the frequency of extreme events. Extreme events are either heavy rainfall or it could be droughts, severe droughts. And then impact on the carbon balance. This is the one which I'm going to stress more, and then I'm going to explain with my research what could be its impact and all that. There could be another, could be species migration. That is, species which is not found earlier in some area will migrate to some different area B, depending on the climate pattern there. And then species extinction. It could result in loss of species which could not tolerate the climate change. Next slide, please. Yeah. So with all these things in mind, there are a group of scientists who actually planned and said, okay, what could be the forested, what could be the response of the forest, and what could be the dynamics of the forest with changing or with accounting for variability in the climate. So long-term ecological research, it is very necessary, and it is to understand the process that drives the pattern in diversity and dynamics of an ecosystem. Here, when I refer to an ecosystem, it will be mostly forested ecosystem. And then there is a growing thrust now to understand the vegetation plots, to understand the forest responses to the forest ecosystems by establishing long-term monitoring plots. There are several agencies across the world. One is the CTFS, that is Center for Tropical Forest Science, which is kind of organized and maintained by the Smithsonian Institution of the US. Next one is Rainfor. This is also a conglomeration of different scientists from across the world, primarily managed by the Oxford University in UK. And then we are the CTFS partners. So we have a long-term connection with the CTFS. So with the CTFS, we have established several plots across the globe in different biomes and different climatic regions to understand what could be its, how the plants or how the species of forest, different species in forest respond to variability in climate. So there is only one plot in India, that is ours, and there is a lot of plots in Southeast Asia, some in Africa, and in some in Europe, and large concentrations in North America and South America and Central America. Next slide, please. So coming to the word, generally we talk about tropical forests. So by and large, generally when you say tropical forest, a large part of the international audience or to understand that it is tropical aseasonal forest. That is forest found around the equator. Then there are, rainforests which are found mostly in the seasonal climates. Like there is a different, distinct rainfall pattern. There is a distinct rainfall time. Then there is seasons, distinct seasons, and then that kind of forest you find in Western Ghats and in Northeast India. All that. In all these things, the dry forest, which constitutes a large part of forested area in the world, has neglected. That means there is little understanding or little research on these forests. Next slide, please. So I'll explain you why this forests or why these seasonal dry tropical forests are very, very important. Now, when you say tropical dry forest, mostly they're called seasonally dry tropical forests. It's found in a very extensive type in the tropics, characteristically adapted to seasonal water stress. So seasonal water stress is the main force that drives the ecology of this forest. Globally, about 1 million square kilometer or 48.5% of the total cover of the forest in the world is SDTF, that is seasonal dry tropical forest. And in Southeast Asia and the mainland South Asia, it forms about 16.7%. And in India, about 46% of the total cover of forest in India is dry tropical forest. Next slide, please. So what drives the ecology of these forests? It's a very heterogeneous vegetation type. I will show you some of the pictures of seasonal dry tropical forests. You can make out how structurally they become different. And then that differences in the structure will influence how much of carbon sequestration or how much of carbon can it contribute to. So you will understand much better there. And the phenology of this forest, that is the timing of leafing, flowering, and all that, it's strongly seasonal. That means everything happens in a season. And then mostly they are believed to be driven by precipitation. They are smaller statured trees. They have lower biomass compared with the tropical rainforest, and they're relatively open canopy. That means the canopies are hardly closed, though in some seasons, like in the peak rainfall season, the canopy is closed. And then interestingly, these forests are found in climates preferred by the human beings. So therefore, it is heavily human modified. So humans have started occupying, modifying, changing the entire landscape of this forested type. And they are also characterized by wildfires, dry season fires. They are faunally rich. That means they have lots of large herbivores and carnivores in the forested types. And that's because of large mammals. They have huge densities. For example, in India, in Mudumalai, where I do research, there is average density of elephants that you find is about 2 animals per square kilometer. That's huge density. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the panoramic view of one of the forests where I work. So it is like hugely open canopy, and this is where I work. Next slide, please. Yeah, if you look at the rainfall pattern in Mudumalai itself, there is so much of variability across the time. We started from 1990, I've gone up to 2016, and then I have to plot 17, 18, 19, all that. So there are periods where there is extremely good rainfall, and there are periods where there is less or absolutely no rain, very, very less rainfall. So the rainfall is kind of highly variable, and this is what makes it more interesting. Next slide, please. This panel of the graph shows you the rainfall season. So rain mostly occurs in June, July, August, September. This is the southwest monsoon, though some of the northwest monsoon is also active here during October, November. Next slide, please. So with that, to understand the long-term ecology of this forest and long-term contribution of this forest to the carbon dynamics, we have established a large single 50-hectare plots. That's about a 0.5 square kilometer area of the plot. And then we have been monitoring over last 30 years, 32 years now. So the plot is being established from one corner, where every 20 meter of the plot is gridded. In the sense, we have put stones at every 20 meters. And we have also looked at the slope between 2 points, so that we capture not only the species diversity, we will also capture what influences the species diversity, that is the spatial or the habitat diversity, for example. How the habitat, is it flat or it is undulating, or how it is going to be. And then we also have 25, 19, 1 hectare plots across the rainfall gradient. I'm going to show you in the next couple of graphs how the rainfall gradient is there in Mudumalai. That makes it more interesting, and that would contribute to the carbon dynamics of the system. So what do we have? The data. The data that we have is, we have all woody plants which are greater than 1 centimeter diameter at breast height, tagged, mapped, identified to species. These diameters are measured once in every 4 years. We conduct annual census of the plot for recruitment and mortality. Recruitment is very, very important phenomena, which I will come back in the later part of my lecture. Apart from this core data, we also have data on climate, that is, how is the rainfall, number of rainy days, temperatures, sunshine, all that. We have data on soils. What is the composition of a soil? How much there is carbon, organic carbon is there, nitrogen, phosphorus, all that. We also have some data on the ground vegetation. That is whether it is grassy, or shrubby, and what kind of invasive species which is occurring, which is as a result of climate change. We also map seasonal fires. Because this forest is subjected to dry season fires, we also map the extent of fire in the forest. So we started this exercise in 1988. We had 26,000 individuals above 1 centimeter diameter in the plot of 72 species. In fact, our plot is a least species rich in the CTFS network. Now we have some plots in Ecuador, South America, where you have about 1,100 species in the 50 hectare plot. And then, for example, in Lambier, in Sarawak, and in Paso, Malaysia, 50 hectare of the forest plots has about 370 species. Then 10 most abundant species in the plot have 88% of the population. That means out of the 72 species, 10 species accounts for 88% of the total abundance or total number of individuals you found in the plot. That means there are about 60 to 12% of the entire population is accounted for by 62 species. You can now see how the relatively rare or less abundant species play a significant role. And if there is any change or if there is any modification of the landscape, these 62 species are put into extremely vulnerable kind of conditions. Whereas in the 1 hectare, 19 1 hectare plots that we have about 20,540 individuals and about 198 species. This is because this spans over a gradient of the rainfall. Hence, you get more number of species and more number of individuals in 19 hectares. Next slide, please. Yeah, I was talking about the rainfall gradient that is existing in the Mudumalai. This is the eastern part, and from the eastern part to the western part, there is about 40 kilometers of straight line distance, and then the rainfall variability or rainfall gradient is about 1,000 millimeters. So we start with something around 700 millimeters here, and then we can go up to something like 1,800 millimeters in the west. So the rainfall goes from east to west, west being the most high rainfall area and the east being the low rainfall area. Hence, it gives the different kinds of vegetation pattern and open canopied nature. In the next pictures, I'll show you how each forested type, looks, and it is so different from that. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is in the northern part of Mudumalai, which is kind of stunted trees, sparsely distributed, and basically grassy. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the central part in which you can see the scattered trees, but trees are a lot of lower sizes, statured, and then you can see the grassy undergrowth in the front. This is the typical vegetation that you find in the 50 hectare permanent vegetation plot. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yes. This is the swamp area, and then there was a fire in that area. You can see the smoke raising. And this is a swampy area which basically have large spans of grasslands. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, this is the typical vegetation of the central part of this sanctuary, and part of our vegetation plot have vegetation like this, characterized by the large, widely sparsed and spaced trees, and then grasses. And these are our field people, field trackers who help us to negotiate or navigate within the forest. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, this is another kind of vegetation that you find in the drier part of the sanctuary. Yeah, next slide. Right. This is probably the driest area of the sanctuary, where you can see there are all kind of stunted shrubs, and a large amount of them are spinescent, or they have spines in the canopy, spines in the tree. So basically, we are we are extracting soil to look at this, and then you can also see open shear clumps here, so invaded by an invasive species from South America. Next step, please. Yeah. So if you look at, I was mentioning we were gridding the plot to capture the habitat heterogeneity. This is how our plot looks. This is on the southwest corner of the plot, and then this is about on the east-west. This is about 1,000 meters, and in the north-south is about 500 meters. And in the center of the plot, there is a stream which is not perennial, but is a seasonal stream. You can make out how the habitat is heterogeneous. You have undulating slopes, plus you have flat land, and you have slopey area, and then plateau area. Next slide, please. So I said we mapped the individual species in space by taking the X and Y coordinates. So I'm going to present three different scenario in three different census periods. For example, this is how the Lagerstroemia microcarpa looks like. Lagerstroemia microcarpa is one of the important timber species, which has a commercial name Nandi Mara. You can see that in 1988, you can see there is a very distinct clumps in two different areas. One is across the right side of the stream, and another one is the left side of the stream. Now come down to 2008, you can see how the how this clump is kind of segregating, or is going. It's losing its clumpiness. So this is partly because of large amount of recruitment that is happening. This is how the spatial dynamics of these species takes place. And in 12, again, they've started congregating in distinct clumps, but the clumpy nature of the species is getting beyond the original clumps. So there is a lot of spatial dynamics that is happening within the species. Next slide, please. This is also called Anogesis lactifolia. This is one other canopy species. This is Dindal Mara anತಾರೆ, which is low quality timber, mostly used for agriculture implements and bullock carts and all that. So you can see in 1988 there are distinct clumps of that, and then it. Can you please come down a little bit? Yeah. No. Anogesis latifolia ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ 2008 picture ಬರುವಂಗೆ. Yeah, thank you. So the clumpy nature has not changed major clumps, but the clumps are getting a little bit sparse. This is largely because of mortality of individuals and no recruitment here. And similar kind of distribution is seen in 2012 also. So next slide, please. This is a species called Helictres isora. This is an interesting plant. This is a shrub, and which is liked by elephants a lot. This elephants browse. ಇದನ್ನ ಬಲಮುರಿ ಅಥವಾ ಎಡಮುರಿ ಅಂತಾರೆ. This is because the fruits of the species have either turned on the left hand side, on the left direction, or towards the right direction. So when it dries, this is a capsule belonging to the Malvaceae family. When it dries, it will either open, when the dried capsule will either open by the left anti-clockwise or the clockwise. The interesting part of this species is during 2003 and 4, we had a massive recruitment of this species. This is called the episodic recruitment. One of the features of the dry forest species to adapt and to sustain the population in stressed environments like dry areas. So you can look at in 1988, you can see hardly some clumps. This is also clumpy distribution. You can see clumps here, clump here, clump here, and all that. But if you come to in 2008, please come down a little bit to show 2008 map. Yeah, you can see how these clumps have, become really, really dense, and this is because of massive recruitment of this species. So similar kind of clumpy nature was also observed in 2012. So there is quite interesting amount of information on how the species are changing in the nature in terms of space. So there's a lot of spatial dynamics that is happening here. Next slide, please. This is another interesting species called Kidia calicina. ಇದನ್ನ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಡೆ ಮರ ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. So this tree is also from the Malvaceae family. You can see that, the interesting part of this species is this was the dominant species in 1988. This had about 5,175 individuals. And this is also again a clumpy. And then in 2008, you see how the clumpy nature has changed, totally changed. And in 2012, you can hardly see any clump. And there is large amount of mortality here, and there is considerable amount of recruitment also, and large amount of mortality because of elephants. This is one of the elephant-favored species. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, if you look at how the population has changed from, I'm going to present the data till 2012. Now, the blue bars in the upper panel of the graph shows the canopy species, and the green bars show the individuals less than 10 centimeters, or basically the shrubby and understory species. So there is a lot of dynamics that is happening in the individuals below 10 centimeter DBH class. So above 10 centimeter DBH class, population is kind of stable, but there is a slow, very, very slow decline. In fact, if you look at the mortality rate of all the individuals above 10 centimeters, in the deciduous forest in India has one of the lowest mortality rate in the world. We have about less than 0.5% of mortality, while several of the plots across the globe have about 1.5, 2% mortality above 10 centimeter diameter class. And then this kind of large spike in the recruitment is because of helictis. The tall green bars is largely because of helictis. And the lower panel of the graph, if you remove helictis from the population, and then if you see, still there is a significant amount of other species also contributing to the population. Yeah. Next slide, please. Right. Now, if you look at the patterns of mortality, how many individuals are dying, this is kind of the dynamics in the system that you can see. So there is large amount of mortality in the lower scale class. This is about 0 to 10 centimeter. And then there is hardly anything in about 10 centimeter, 10 to 30 centimeter. And then above more than 30 centimeter, there's hardly any mortality that is happening. And these numbers will tell you how many individuals have died because of the following causes, whether it was killed by fire or by the elephant or by any other causes which you cannot attribute to either to the fire or to the elephant. Next graph, please. Yeah. So this is the recruitment in this. Recruitment is also kind of fluctuating. And then there is a period in which, there is 2004 to 2009, this large recruitment is happening. And this recruitment is primarily driven by one particular species that I was talking, that is Helictis isora. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at the mortality and recruitment dynamics, the red bars represent mortality, and the red arrows show the incidences of fire in that particular year. So I have plotted till 2012 because after 2012 we started sampling from the 50 hectare. We are not sampled the entire 50 hectare. So this I meant to analyze and put that graph because that's about 1/3 sampling, and I have to project it to the full kind of sampling. So this here will tell you how the mortality is very high when there is extremely high events, and this blue bars will tell you the years of drought. And then from 2000 onwards, there is significant amount of recruitment that is happening. And if I stretch this graph till 2020, then this mortalities will come down, then recruitments will happen. This is very, very important because you cannot conclude the forest nature or forest dynamics with very, very short-term data like 4 years or 3 years or 4 years. We need to have really, really long-term data to say what is happening. And then this is elephant-inflicted mortality, how the elephants can inflict mortality by stripping of the bark, breaking the top portion of that. And this will tell you how, if you plot the percent mortality because of various reasons, large number of or high percent mortality is observed in lower sex classes, and largely because of fire and elephants, and natural other causes will also kind of the lower individuals come down because of that. So fire is a primary agent of mortality in the lower size classes. Next slide, please. Okay, this is how the forest patch looks when immediately after the fire. Next slide. You can see the contrasting change of the same area just after 2-3 showers of or just after rains. You just cannot make out that area was subjected to fire. So this is the beauty of dynamics of the dry forest. Next slide. Yes, I was talking to you about one of the impacts of climate change is spread of invasive species. And this would definitely affect the carbon balance or the carbon sequestration potentials of our trees. I'll tell you in the next few following graphs. See, one of the important invasive species is the Lantana camara. What we are doing here is we are now looking at the qualitative abundance of Lantana in the 50 hectare plot, and then each block or each square represent 10 square meter block. So we have given different color combinations. So in 1990, you can see this color will, is just presence of lantana. This color indicates the lantana is present, but not in a significant amount. But there are some darker shades, darker colors, which shows that there is, dense lantana occurring in this patch here and here. These are all the patches. So by the turn of 2008 and 18, you will get to see how the lantana has spread. Next slide, please. Yeah, this was in 2008. There is still areas without lantana. These white patches are without lantana. And then there are still patches with just the presence of lantana. But you can make out the darker shades is expanding. Hence, the lantana has started growing. And next slide, please. If you look at the same thing in 2018, there is no area which has no lantana. So every single cell has got lantana. And the deep red, the red color indicates the very, very dense lantana. The yellow color indicates common presence of lantana. Okay, so This can be attributed, this kind of lantana expansion can be attributed to two things. One is the major drought around 2001 to 2004, where the rainfall was less than 40% below normal. Second, there is a massive fire in 2002. So, combination of fire in 2002 and the combination of drought in between these has helped lantana to spread. And if because of the climate change, if you think that these kind of events, the frequency of events change or frequency of events occur more than what is expected, then that would definitely help uh, invasive species like lantana, hippatoria to establish and colonize. And once, if this kind of process goes on for years, then that could potentially remove all the native species. That would lead to the species loss, so to say. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes. Now coming to the real carbon part of it. There are two ways in which you can measure how the carbon balance or how the carbon is actually accounted by the forest. First thing would be looking at the basal area. That is the wooded area, the entire wooded area of the forest. There is a change in the graph. Can you please put on the slides, please? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So one area would be to look at the basal area. So from 1988 up till 2016, the last major census, you can see that in the 50 hectare plot, the basal area is going up. And then it has gone up between 2012 to 2016, gone up really, really considerably. And the next slide, please. And the second important aspect of this carbon would be the biomass. You can look at how the biomass has changed over time from 1988 to 2016. From roughly about 170 tons per hectare, it has gone up to something like 200 tons per hectare. And by the 2020, the average biomass in the 50 hectare plot is about 2040 tons a hectare. So that is the kind of projection is going on. And this increment in the biomass is largely because of the growth, and that is largely because of carbon sequestration that these trees are doing. So this is where the carbon balance really, really comes in. And then these slightly grayish bars will tell you how much of the biomass contributed by the understory, such as grass, lantana, all of them put together. You can obviously make out between 2004 to 2008, there is increase in the understory biomass. This is largely because of expansion of lantana, and that would have contributed significantly to the understory biomass. Yeah. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the greening part of the country. What is the use of measuring all these factors, all these things, monitoring the forest? So now can we classify some of these species which are really fast growing and which are really slow growing, and then advise the forest department in the greening mission. Now we can tell the forest department, or we can tell any of the people who are kind of taking up this job of planting new trees or new species in areas to combat the carbon increase in the atmosphere. For example, these are the fast growing species, which is less than about a centimeter per year. Over 30 centimeters of size, these two ficus species grow much faster and then between this growth rate, about 0.4 centimeter to less than 1 centimeter, these 4 species have a really fast growth rate, above 30 centimeters in size. For example, Ficus virens, Diasporus montana, Grevia, Syzygium. This is Syzygium is Jamun or Nerlemara, and this is Lagostromia nandimara. So if Lagostromia, Syzygium, all these trees are above 30 centimeters in size, they are really fast growing. They grow much faster than other species. Next slide. Yeah, these are the medium growth species. Then next slide. Next slide. And these are the slow growing species. So if any forest department official or any planning personality comes to and asks, so can you advise me about what kind of species that we can plant? Or can you advise me what kind of trees that I should plant? Looking at what kind of carbon sequestration rate achievement I wanted to do. Then we can obviously give an advice and tell him, see, if they are interested in planting the natural forest species, you can tell them, see, if you plant Dalbergia latifolia, Kidia calycina, these are the species that grow very slowly, but whereas ficus, all these species, grow much faster than expected. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm going to deal with 3 things here. First one, which I presented that shows you the current establishment, the current sequestration pattern, what is happening. And I'm going to the dendrochronology, that means the aging of trees. Dendro is a tree, chronos is age, logi is study. So aging of tree study. This I'm going to take you little backwards in the time and tell you how this carbon or growth has happened, and that would relate to that would tell you how much of growth or carbon sequestration has happened over time. I'll tell you that. And then in the next section of my talk, where I'm going to talk a little bit on the phenology, that will tell you what happens, the variability in the climate, how much of it affects the growth, hence the carbon dynamics of the forest. Next slide, please. Now, dendrochronology is like looking at annual growth rings. Now, each tree grows annually. There is annual growth in any of these. But some trees produce such rings, like you can see it in the right panel of the graph, where we can actually age them by counting these rings. And one of the trees that we luckily have in our subcontinent, or the Indian peninsula, is Tectona grandis, that is teak. So teak has really good potential for aging the tree, and also reconstruction of climate, what was happened in the past. Next slide, please. Right. So I have plotted the annual rainfall pattern from 1901 to 2007 based on the grid data that is available in IITM, that is Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology. So I have taken the Mudumalai grid, plotted and extracted the rainfall data, and then I plotted how the annual rainfall pattern looks like. So annual rainfall pattern is not either going up or going low. It is quite variable with high peaks and low, droughts and less rainfall, abundant rainfall, normal rainfall, all these things. Next slide, please. I also looked at how, next slide. Yeah, I have also looked at how the temperatures have changed. The blue line represents the mean annual minimum temperature, and the red line represents the mean annual maximum temperature. You can look at that. There is a slight increasing trend, recently. This is, though in early 1901, this is kind of up and down. Over 1950 onwards, there is a slight increasing trend in the maximum temperature. Next slide, please. So I have extracted the ring width. I've counted all the rings from different trees. I've taken the core samples, wood core samples, and then polished them and watched, observed under the microscope. I've seen how the ring widths are there from between one ring to the another ring. So that would actually tell you how much of growth has taken place. And I have gone back to something like 1700 to 2010. This is about 300 years data. Okay. So if you now plot all the mean ring widths, I have used about 84 tree crores here, cores. 80, after the 84 tree cores, this is the mean ring widths for per each year. You can see that the growth, that is, you can see here, is not sort of, they are growing, sometimes they are not growing, and then sometimes they have shown extremely high growth. So you can see two important patterns. One is early, one during 1700 to 1750. There is really a high growth. And then secondly, from mid 1920s and 30s up till something like 1960s, there is a extremely high growth here. Again, in 2010, there are growths here. So what does it mean? It means that there is a pattern that you can see, which is driven by either the disturbances that is caused by human beings or by any natural climatic events. I have absolutely no idea what's happening between 1700s to 1750. I've tried to look at the history, and I tried to look at how much what could be the impact. I was not able to reconstruct the rainfall pattern for that time, though some other studies would have done it. I have to see whether there was kind of a drought period. But in early 1900s to 1950, 60, I can definitely make out this is largely a human influence, because at that time the world wars were happening, and British were in desperate need of timber. They exploited large canopy trees and promoting the growth of smaller trees, because they have exploited large trees because of one is to build their shipping industry, and second one is to burn this wood for their in the kilns to bake the bake the bread for the British soldiers. And in 2000, this also, I'm a little bit surprised why there is so much of spike in the growth. This could also be a result of post drought from 2004. It has suddenly shot up. Yeah. Next slide, please. So if you look at in the historical context, what was the kind of carbon that is being taken, and what can you infer from these rings? So we can look at the annual sequestration of carbon was in the range of 57.8 kgs to 16 kg per tree during 1730 to 2010. So there are times when there is large, about 57 kgs, that is good amount of carbon is taken in. And there are times where less carbon or 16 kgs of carbon taken. Then if you now split at different time periods, do they have some kind of variation? For example, the carbon taken during 1900 to 2010 was about 45 kgs with a standard deviation of 5.3 kg. Okay, and this is the range 33.9 to 57.8, where I have got 111 cores have gone in there. This is significantly higher than the carbons sequestered around 1700s and 1800s. I've informed this from t-test. So what we can conclude? The general conclusion that we can safely draw from this is there is an increasing trend in the carbon sequestration in the recent years. This carbon sequestration is primarily could be a result of CO2 fertilization that is being observed in the atmosphere, and then there could also be part of disturbance. So what it tried next was, next slide please. Next slide, yeah. What it tried in the next slide was, there is this carbon concentration data available from hours from NASA Hawaii. There's a tower there, and then looked at how much is growth rate and then carbon sequestration rate in the trees. The carbon concentration and the sequestration have shown positive trend from 1959 to present 2007 or 2010 have gone up to. Before 1959, this kind of carbon concentration data is not there. So this was started in 1959. So I measured, I looked at the carbon concentration in the atmosphere, and then I also looked at how much of carbon is taking in, to proving the point that the enhanced carbon fertilization in the atmosphere would obviously help in the sequestration more. That is because these plants are C3 plants. So C3 plants can do better in enriched carbon atmosphere. And then there are C4 plants which will do better in low carbon times. Next slide. Next slide, please. So what is the take-home message from this dendro study? So, we can explain the growth of trees in Mudumalai, explain temperature. Minimum temperatures during the pre-monsoon time and monsoon time are influencing the growth. And then moisture, for example, either the rainfall, soil moisture, or PDSI, that is Farmers Drought Sensitivity Index, has shown no significant influence. So if there is a rise in the temperature, that is because of carbon fertilization and carbon stocking in the atmosphere, our trees can grow much faster and our trees can take in large amount of carbon. But there is everywhere, in everything, there is some kind of a plateau that you would observe in the time to come, and that plateau we have not yet reached still. So when it reaches, that becomes carbon saturated and the trees don't sequester anymore. That is kind of signals that we are seeing in Amazon and some parts of the African rainforest. And our Malaysian or the Southeast Asian rainforest are still are not showing the signs of carbon saturation, but they're slowly approaching towards carbon saturation. But the rainfall has a 2-year lag influence on the growth rate. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now I come to the last segment of my talk. This is to do with the phenology. The likely part that I have tried to explain here is, this explains or determines how much of leaf or what period of leaf can be there, and then what is the influence of such variability on the growth, hence the carbon of the sun. So this is one of the important indicators to measure the impact of climate on the trees, and then resulting in the carbon sequestration or carbon dynamics of a community. Next slide, please. Yeah. To briefly introduce the topic of phenology for those who are not kind of used to or who have not kind of gone through this. This is responses, phenological response. Phenology is nothing but appearance. It means phenos is appearance, and logos is study. So study of appearance is phenology, to tell you in a very laymanish English. So this phenological responses are the outcome of plant responses to the environmental condition. So how much of plant, or how much, how do plants respond to environment condition? And we know that this global climate change that we have seen is affecting the functioning of all different kinds of ecosystems. And then this philological response is one of the most sensitive parameters assumed to be altered as a result of climate change. That means if you have to measure the impact of climate change on plants or on trees, it has to be a long-term data, or you need to have something like a dendroecology, which you can go back in time and see how things have changed. While plant phenology is like a very, very short, and it's very sensitive, and then you can immediately understand uh, the influence of climate or the variability in the climate on trees and how do trees respond. So this kind of long-term quantitative data and plant phenology is baseline information for modeling the species range, species distribution, and all that. Next slide, please. Yeah. In dry forests, uh, moisture moisture stress is supposed to be the primary factor influencing phenology in dry forest. That is, our dry forests are moisture stressed. Hence, the balance in the moisture is a very, very significant factor that alters in this phenology. And what could be the response? What are the expected responses because of changes in the moisture? Is annual periodicity in different phenophases. It means how do different phenophase is nothing but one stage in life of a plant. Does the plant has flower, or does the plant has leaf? What kind of leaf it has, whether it is sprouting or mature leaf. So this different stages in the plant are called phenophases. So it can influence the periodicity, whether these uh, events occur every year in a regular cycle, or it doesn't change. It doesn't matter. So this kind of periodicity is we have there is change. If there is a change, that is maybe because of climate, and that is we can expect that to have change. And these kind of changes will have bearing on the growth. I will tell you how things have changed, and hence carbon sequestration and reproductive output of plants. And it also has a bearing on the co-evolutionary forces. Like, we know that plants and animals have evolved in side by side or jointly. So there are mutualistic interactions that we can see among the pollinators, dispersers, all that. So what are the bearing on such changes on the forces such as pollinators and dispersers? Yeah, next slide, please. Right. So what I have done here is I've tried to plot two different dry forests. One is the dry deciduous and one is the dry thorn forest. So in the dry deciduous and the dry thorn forest, if you now look at the intensity of leaf flush, it's kind of peaks in a sequential or in a similar pattern that you can observe. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is in the flowering, and this is the flowering. You can see how the flowers have changed. So the intensity of flowering between the dry thorn and the dry deciduous forest are significantly different based on the KS test. Next slide, please. And in the young fruits are also kind of significantly different between dry and dry thorn. So having this base knowledge, let me take you to what happens in two different scenarios. One is the drought and one is in abundant years. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in Mudumala, what happened was, it was kind of a God-given gift where we could study both impact of drought and normal or abundant period. I call them drought and abundant. Between 2000 to 2004, there was a huge drought, and from between 2004 to 2008, there was a big abundant rainfall period. So this, what I've tried to do is, I've looked at the responses of various species. I'm going to plot only 4 important canopy species here. How do they respond to environmental conditions in drought period and in the abundant period? So now if you have to characterize whether there was any change in between the drought and the abundant period, if you look at rainfall, for example, in the drought period, it was about 1000 millimeters. And then in the abundant period, it was 1400 millimeters. And this was statistically significant. The mean rainfall in the abundant period was definitely higher than the mean rainfall in the drought period. And similarly also, number of wet days, that is how many days in the drought there was rain and how many days in the wet or abundant days, in the abundant years there was. So there was about 113 days and 152 days, and this is very, very significantly different. So during the abundant period, the rainfall was temporarily scattered much, much wider than the drought period. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, okay. So this is the intensity of leaf initiation among the 4 canopy species in dry forest. You can look at during normal period, the intensity of leaf initiation is really high compared to drought in anabasis. And then in drought period, there are bimodal, while in normal period, there's unimodal. See, this bimodal initiation is very, very energy demanding, and hence the sequestration of carbon will be very, very low during drought years. Similarly, in the tectona, you can see bimodal, and then come down, please. In Lagostromia and in Matti, you can see that generally intensity of leaf flushing in drought period was less than in the abundant period in the canopy species. Next slide. Yeah. If you now look at during the drought years, how does the leaf initiation varies across months? You can see that the leaf initiation is very much spread across the years, and this is the leaf initiation or any physiological mechanism is very, very energy intensive and energy demanding. So plants have to turn their reserved foods, or they have to really enhance their manufacturing capability of food to meet the demands to expand or to initiate leaves. There is so much of scatter in the initiation of leaves during the drought years. But while the same thing in the, come down please, come down, next panel of so hold there, hold. Yeah, in the next panel, in this panel, during the normal years, we can see most of them have concentrated leaf initiation here. So the advantage of this pattern would be that once the leaf initiation has occurred in one time, and then they can proceed for the next phase, so that they can concentrate their effort in manufacturing food and storing it in them. Hence, the carbon can be sequestered and carbon can go into the stems and live there or stored there. Next slide. Similar patterns is seen in the flower initiations also. And flowering and fruiting are extremely energy demanding and extremely resource intensive. So plants have to really, really spend a huge amount of energy in producing these flowers. So So what happens with the increasing in the uh, extreme events, for example, if the frequency of such extreme events happen, then your carbon sequestration potential is lost and then your carbon sequestration rates go low. Hence, whatever the carbon that we are putting up in the atmosphere may not go back or may not be stored. Hence, we are going to we are going to enhance the effects of uh, climate change. We increase the floods, we increase heavy rainfall. There is a glacier melter, and then surface temperatures go up. These are the possible effects of such frequency of events. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Similarly, the young fruit stage, you can see is so much of scatter in the drought, where in the come down to the lower panel of the graph. Come down. Yeah, stay there. In the normal or in the abundant periods, you can also see. Though there is a species-specific variation is there. For example, Anagaisis, it is temporarily segregated from rest of the species. So rest of the species have one peak during, for example, in July, whereas the young fruit stage is peaked in October in Anagaisis. This is a species-specific variation. There's nothing to do with it. Yeah, next slide. Right. So if you now measure the strength of seasonality, in a sense, how, what is the kind of probability that this leaf initiation is heavily cyclic, or with what strength the cyclicity of the event called the leaf initiation happens. So, when you compare this one, 0.501 and 0.763, so during the normal years, the leaf initiation is much more stronger than drought years. This is almost true of all the canopy species. Next slide. A similar pattern with flower initiation also. For example, there is almost highly cyclicity or high seasonality observed in normal years compared to drought years. Yeah, next slide. Similar pattern with fruiting also. So the take-home message is that during drought years, you lose the strength of your seasonality, and hence you tend to scatter your events, and hence you're putting a lot of stress on the trees. Next slide, please. Yeah. Well, I'll skip this. So synchrony. Yeah. So I'm going to end here, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm extremely grateful to Jagada, my classmate. We studied together in my BSc. So Jagada, thank you very much. And I hope most of you enjoyed this talk, or if you have any questions, I would love to take it.
I request all the delegates, if you have any questions, you please ask.
Sir, we'll ask the questions at the end.
No issues. It depends on your organizers. However you want, you can do it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Next, just introducing Dr. S. Guruprasad. I request Srimati Kalavati SG, lecturer in commerce, to introduce Dr. S. Guruprasad.
I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Prasad. Did is University and is Master's in Machine Design from Bangalore University. He did his PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, Research and Development Engineers, a DRDO laboratory in the year 1986 as a scientist and contributed in many research and development activities projects. He has worked on missile launchers related to integrated guided missile development at APJ Abdul Kalam. He research in the areas of underwater dynamics, blast structures, and composite structures. Significant contribution as project director, BrahMos responsible for weapon launch system of BrahMos. He has many technical publications to his credit in various national and international journals and conference. He has 30 patents to his credit. Some of them he contributed in development and induction of many systems related to combat engineering, weapon launch system, and robotics. He was appointed as Director General in the year 2016. He led many international scientific delegations, setting the course of international defense research cooperations. He also contributed to the defense technology acquisition and manufacturing policies of the country. He co-chaired the Joint Technology Group with USA that made significant progress during his tenure. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
For your kind introduction.
Thank you very much, Kalavati. Now I request our guest of honor, Dr. S. Guruprasad, to address the delegates.
Thank you very much. I am very, very glad to be with all of you. And the first memory that comes to my mind is Shivakumar Swamiji. Very fresh the day I met Shivakumar Swamiji many decades ago. In fact, at that time, I had gone with, as a small boy, I had gone with my father to take darshan. And then it just got imprinted in my memory, that meeting. And even today, it is very fresh and green. 2 points I noticed, even do today I remember, which Swamiji mentioned. One was to preserve the forest, that is trees, cut less trees, whatever is needed, that only you must, you people should cut, that he was giving a message. Then another thing he was telling about was that time the tractors were coming for irrigation, that is for agriculture. Then the bullocks, there was a fear that the bullocks will go out of this thing. Then he was telling maintain a balance and try to use both. And one the thing, very specific point I remember he was mentioning was load your carts little bit less because you should be very sensitive. You are exploiting an animal and don't exploit too much. That is memory of my meeting Dr. Shivakumar Swamiji a very, very long time back. And my pranam to him and also to Siddaganga Swamiji, the present Swamiji of Siddaganga Math. Then coming back to, I'm not a subject expert in this particular area, but two incidents I always remember. One is when we had the scientific expedition to Antarctica. I was not part of the expedition, but I designed part of the systems there which were going to be used. We had set up Dakshina Gangotri on an ice shelf in Antarctic ice shelf. That was the first Indian scientific station, and that was set up there. There, the lifeline is then first time wintering was going to be done. So in Antarctica winter, you are cut off from the world because the temperatures will be something like minus 70 degrees Celsius, and also there will be blizzards, and it is totally dark. So the scientific team which is going to be there positioned in Antarctica, and they are going to study, they are literally living on ice and on an ice shelf because the station is built on the ice shelf. Then their life has to be, depends entirely on the power generation because they need heating to survive, and everything has to, and then they need to communicate. For communication, we had a HF communication system which was connecting to our lab because we were monitoring the systems from our lab. How the generation, power generation is going on, that is genset, monitoring of genset, remote monitoring of gensets, and also if they want to communicate any scientific research data, they will communicate through this HF link. So as the winter started setting, this setting up of the station happened in summer, but then winter started setting in. So these people have to stay, and some part of the team, that is summer team, returns that time before setting in of winter, and the wintering team will start working there. So what we noticed was, as the winter set in, the communication link started failing. It was not because of any technical reason. It was only because of ozone hole. The ionosphere at that part is upset, and if it is very essential for HF communication because these radio waves get reflected from ionosphere, and that is how the communication happens. Long distance communication happens using the HF technology. So we were not getting any communication from them. And then, of course, there was a standby, very, very expensive that time because we did not have our own satellites. So therefore, we had to hire the satellite time, which was very, very premium. And it was also available for a very short duration. But that is how we came to know. We had not just came to know, we had the first-hand experience of ozone hole. But it is okay to have a ozone hole on a pole because it happens because the sun rays don't reach there. Therefore, the ozone layer becomes very thin and communication doesn't happen. So that is how we started feeling the heat of the environmental change right in the 1980s. Then there was a huge study done on ozone holes internationally. Luckily, they banned the man-made the chemical molecules like CFC and other things. And presently, the ozone hole is the ozone layer is in a healthy condition. But there are many factors where the ozone layer and this ionosphere to sustain, like methane and excessive carbon dioxide, man-made pollutants. That is, these are the things of concern. Then another this thing touch with especially ecological studies, environmental studies was I had to see a lab where they had this thing. It is basically we had to help them in setting up the lab and in going around things, and of course the BARC helped the organization. So there is one agency called Himalayan Environmental Studies and Conservation Organization. It is basically a research setup, a privately non-profit NGO type of this thing. They don't go for any protest or anything. They work with the government. They take funds from government for research, and very significant research they carry out on especially Himalayan region environmental studies. What they were doing, it was very interesting. I was providing some systemic support from DRDO. What they were doing is very interesting. They were studying isotopes. So from isotopes, the ratio of isotopes and the content of the isotopes. So they were studying on aquifers, how the river streams are getting their feed, from which part of the like mountains, from which mountain, which aquifer is getting charged. So that was a very interesting study I found, and when I went through the research studies they had done, it was amazing. And what was amazing was, so how the Himalayan system is linked to the entire India. How it is like a great wall which is protecting India from many things, and also it is very, very sensitive, and for the entire eco balance of entire India, including the southern peninsula, the Himalayan ecology is very, very sensitive and important. That's what I gathered. So the most important thing to understand is the scientific approach in any study is very important. Science is also a part of art. That is my belief. So people need not start segregating science is something which is not part of art. So it is essentially, it is an art to understand science and apply science. So my appeal to people is have a scientific outlook and have a scientific temper, true scientific temper. So that is what is today important. So today I heard the talk of Dr. Suresh, very scientifically done, very, very systematically done. It is an amazing studies Professor has carried out, and we are all seeing the heat of the environmental change, that is the global warming is for true. Some few years ago people were still debating it may not be the man-made, it may be a natural cycle, but today it is established, it is all man-made. So we have to undo the things, we have to bring back the way it is progressing. The imbalance is happening, has to be corrected. I don't know how it will happen, whether it will happen, but if at all it happens, it has to happen only by scientific means. Only science can save us, nothing else. And then, of course, backed by proper corrective measures, like we should go for green energy systems. Today, as the Olympics is happening, entirely on renewable energy. Over the ocean, they have many windmills and solar arrays which are supplying energy to the Olympic village. The entire Olympics is run on green energy. That is very, very heartening thing. So My best wishes to the participants of this webinar, and also my thanks are due to Dr. Jagada, and also my greetings to my appreciation to Dr. Suresh and Mr. Shivakumar, Shekar, and also my pranam to the Siddaganga Math, the great institute, the great organization which has given to the country many great institutes. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Guruprasad sir has mentioned some of the memories of his past when he met our Swamiji. I think you know that, sir, your information is very good for us. And I extend my grateful thanks on behalf of our principal and also the staff members. Thank you very much, sir. Now we move to valedictory note by Professor B.M. Malini, NAAC coordinator, Sri Siddaganga First College of Nelamangala.
Pranams to Swamijis, and also summarize the some complete webinar resourceful persons lectures. I first tell about Dr. H.S. Suresh, ecologist, Indian Institute of Science. He give more information about carbon dynamics information. First, he said loss of ozone layers and increase of the temperature in Earth, and also impact of carbon balance. How it was affected. This is extent, tolerance, and forest species. Also, he dynamic economic systems of rain forest and seasonal dry tropical forest and changes of entire landscape, how it was affected in our uh, country and also a continent. And he also said long-term ecological changes in South India, South Indian forest. He also explained the how this elephant was decline in the strength of our forest because of they have no food at all, and also they cannot live without the nature. That's why lantana benemara, he can say how in the once in 4 years the complete nature was changed, but in this time, in this period, we lost this type of nature. And how lantana was disappear in the nature because of the nature drought and the massive fire. Lantana was very much important in our life. We can't think about it because all of the common people was think lantana was useful, how it was useful to people and public and also nature. Though so it was very much important species in our nature. And Suresh sir also tell about the carbon level in nature was decreased, but we can also planting a nerle mara, jambu mara for fast growing trees. Fast growing trees was very much important in our nature. How we can increase our trees to develop the carbon level was down. So it was also a very much informative points also. And he also explained the C3 plans. C3 plans was very much important in our life because it was also how it was developed uh, um, in our lifestyle also. And he also explained the plant phenology response in one of the most sensational work of ours, and also leaf inspeciation, flower inspeciation, and dry fruit inspeciation. It was very much important in our nature. So it was very much informative lecture and given some, all of on the public and agriculturalist and also a human being how to increase our plant and increase our forest. Thank you, sir. It was very informative lecture on us. And also another resource person, Guruprasad sir, he said that how a ozone layer was damaged by the heat of carbon dioxide, and man-made error was because of methane and exclusive carbon dioxide use the we can use varieties of mechanism because it was affected entire our nature. Himalayan region affected entire India by isotopes and rivers. It was also a very much information, sir. And also he is appeal to people. Scientific approach is very much important in our life. We can go through scientific approach. We can uh, in, uh, decline the carbon level in the nature also. So thank you, sir, one and all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, bro.
I extend my grateful thanks to Professor P.M. Malini. And just she has mentioned the summary of the three great resource persons. I think the topic carbon dynamics in deciduous forest. At the time of discussing about this, our Dr. Jagada madam and myself, we have discussed so many matters. I think at present, you know that all the trees, they are going to lose the leaf seasonally. But the problem is here, how that carbon dioxide is responsible to lose all the leaf unseasonally. This is the very important matters. In this occasion, I think we are all depending on, or we are all in the developed country. In the name of technology, just we are going to cut all the trees, but sapling of the trees and some other things which are related to the nature are not going on properly at present. Because of that only, Dr. S. Jagda madam has recommended this title for us. And I think you know that it is a very wonderful session, I thought. And our resource person, and they have delivered a tremendous speech for us. I think it is very useful for us. In this occasion, just I want to say something about our institution also. Our college located in a rural area. It started in 1984-85 in the pioneer of the catering the education in the field of social science and also commerce at the UG level in the Bengaluru rural district, Karnataka state. It is managed by Sri Siddaganga Education Society registered Tumkur of Karnataka Ratna and Padma Bhushana. Dr. Sri Shivakumar Mahaswamiji is the founder of this society. Our college offers two UG programs like BA and BCom courses affiliated to Bengaluru University. The institution is making all efforts to realize its noble vision to providing value-based education at an affordable cost by giving admission to students of all walks of life. Our students have also excelled by both in curricular and also extracurricular activities. Our college has secured 11 ranks at the university level, securing 5 and 8 ranks in arts and 7 ranks in commerce. Besides, Sri K. Santosh Kumar, having secured highest marks in history and has won this cash prize award from Bangalore University. And our student Harish also has scored the good marks in English. At present, the college as a winner volleyball, badminton, and also runner-up in women's throwball team at inter university level. Won the cricket tournament first place, volleyball second place, and kabaddi second place held during the year 1920. Our college offering BA courses for 30 years and BCom courses from 25 years. The college publishes annual magazines Mangalaganga to tap this hidden talent of the students. Guest lectures, seminars, and factory visits are regularly conducted to give the more practical orientation to BA and BCom students. The teachers are also encouraged to take up the research work in their specialized area and are deputed to seminars, conferences, workshops, FDPs to update their knowledge. The institution has a state of this art of infrastructure like seminar hall, two computer lab, a spacious laboratory and information center with the open access system as a learning resource center, reference section, barcoding system, online e-journals. By giving this brief information, total just I want to conclude that my speech, our Swamiji, Dr. Sri Shukumar Mahaswamiji has started this institution for the purpose of only the rural area students. Therefore, only more than 10,000 of students and they got a degree from our college. I am very proud to say before our delegates. With all this, now I move to vote of thanks. I request Srimati Aruna Kumari SK, registration convener, to propose a vote of thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. With the great blessings of His Holiness Sri 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 Dr. Shivakumar Swamiji and Sri 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 Siddhalinga Swamiji, it's an immense pleasure that I, Arun Kumari SK, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Sri Siddaganga Arts and Commerce, First Grade College, Nelamangala, has been given a great opportunity to deliver vote of thanks for this magnanimous event, which is a form of webinar. I render my vote of thanks to all the dignitaries of all this event. A meaningful webinar in the name of Carbon Dimensions in Deciduous Forest on this day, 3rd, 2021. I wholeheartedly thank keynote addresser Mr. Shivakumar Shekar, who is the founder of Indo-European Cultural Committee, Poland. Your speech was so thoughtful and informative. It's really made us wonder. We express our gratitude for such an inspiring speech. Thank you, sir. Secondly, the keynote speaker of this webinar, Dr. H.S. Suresh, Ecologist, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Your speech was so truly inspiring and kept us spellbound. I'm sure a lot of is going out of to come after hearing your speech, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I would further extend our gratitude to the chief guest of this webinar, Dr. S. Guruprasad, retired DRDO Ministry of Defense, Government of India. Thank you for your gracious presence and making this program meaningful. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our principal, Dr. S. Rajesh, Sri Siddaganga First Grade College, Arts and Commerce, Nelamangala, who has been eternal source of support and motivated, guided all of us to organizing such a great webinar. Thank you, sir. My sense of gratitude to Dr. S. Jagada, Professor and HOD, Department of English, convener of this webinar. B. Malini, Professor and HOD, Department of History, NAAC coordinator of our college. Dr. K. Amarendra, Professor and HOD, Department of Geography, IQAC coordinator of our college. Dr. G. Gangaraju, Professor, Department of English, Organizing Secretary of this webinar. I must thank all the organizing team, all the committee conveners and members, technical head Dr. M.G. Muniraju, Physical Education Director, St. Clarent College, and volunteers for working hard for the past few days to make this webinar successful. And I congratulate all the participants and students for their active participation. Thank you everyone once again for making it great success. Have a nice day.
Thank you, madam. I extend my grateful thanks, my personal thanks to Arna Kumari madam to propose a vote of thanks. Apart from that, I want to remember some of the faculty members who are responsible to conduct such a wonderful program. Technical Committee Convener, Mr. Uday Kumar M. Member, Dr. G. Gangaraju, Srimati Kalavati, Manu Kumar HP, Som Sundar S, Srimati Manjula KB. Registration Committee Convener, Aruna Kumari, Kempegoda K, Chaitra, Purnima C, Nagaraju M. Organizing Committee Convener, Dr. S. Jagada. Member, Dr. K. N. Amarendra, Dr. G. Gangaraju, Sri Ramesh Babu BK. Stage Committee Convener, Sri H.S. Prakash. Members, Srimati Komlai NG, Srimati Manjura DS, Srimati Vijayaratna HB, Ashok Kumar B, and Pushpalata KS. Supervising Committee Convener, Professor B.M. Malini and Professor Muni Ratnam. I extend my special thanks to technical cooperation of Dr. M.G. Munraju, Physical Education Director, St. Clarent College, Jalahalli, Joyvin Jorme F. St. Clarent College, Jalahalli. Sir, really, we are remembering always your cooperation and also support, and you are the part and parcel of the successful program. Once again, on behalf of our Swamijis and our principal and also our faculty members, I extend my grateful thanks to one and all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Certificate.
Participants, kindly note the feedback link will be shared in the chat box and the feedback link will be active for 24 hours. Kindly fill your proper email ID and get your certificates. Thank you.